No, that's a drum parade.
Yeah.
Reset, go, Firelock. Give fire! Secure, Firelock. Ready? Set! Fire! Hold it. Don't go, Firelock. Hold it.
Lead yourself from the field of battle. You have been vanquished.
You're in a world of hurt. I've seen it happen. The guy lived, but he's almost wished he didn't. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to climb and load. I'm going to make ready, present, and fire. When I turn around to present and fire, that's the time at which I'll shoot. It's going to take almost a minute to load because I'm going to do it slowly so you can see what I'm doing. Fast load under fire, you can fire 3 shots. That's 20 seconds between shots. There will be a loud, very loud noise, but it's not going to be the sharp kind of noise that will hurt your ears. But a young child might be frightened by it, so make sure they understand. It's going to be a loud noise when I turn around and point that way. Take care, musket demonstration. Prime and load. 2 cartridges because I like loud noises. This is why you need teeth. I take the camera stall lever safety off, put powder in the pan. Close the pan, cast it out, powder down the barrel. Again, normally I would not use 2 cartridges. If I was loading from 1 cartridge, the bullet would be inside at the top. So I'd simply put it in. Now keep in mind, I haven't even fired a shot yet. I'm just getting ready to shoot. And now I've put the rammer back, otherwise this is the only shot I take today. Replace the rammer. Okay. Take ready!
Is there a few steps you have to go forward so that you're not getting my time?
Oh, I guarantee I won't go there. Back there. Take ready. There we go. Present. Fire. Now, notice the smoke.
Yeah.
Think 300 to 1,000 men in 2 or 3 ranks, all firing at the same time. I don't care if he's wearing shirts that tall. I still can't see. So, we can understand that in open field, the colored uniforms and the straight lines were not effective. It made sense in Europe. But those woods over there are like a croquet lawn compared with the woods in 1757. At that time, the woods were full of brush and briars and brambles and thorns. We had to wear gaiters to protect our legs. You could not keep a straight line for 15 seconds in there, and you couldn't see. Meanwhile, the French and Indians are hiding behind the trees and shooting you. Did not work in the woods, the straight lines and the colored uniforms. So if you want to know what the Rangers did, talk to the good folks over there. Eventually, the British adopted the woods fighting tactics, which is the only reason that they ended up winning, even though there was 1.5 million English-speaking Americans, there were only 75,000 French-speaking. Most of the Indians allied with the French. So the war lasted as long as it did. Any questions?
Resupply.
Yeah, you can't really fight in the rain because black powder doesn't do well in the rain or the sleet or anything like that, which is one of the reasons why George Washington taking the fort after he crossed the Delaware, that very famous painting, he did that mainly by bayonet. He did not have very many people able to fire because it was sleeting that day. Not only was it sleeting, it was less than 30 degrees. These people went across the water and walked 6 miles to take the fort in the dark. There was mistiming and stuff as far as another group of folks go around back, and the British were not expecting anything because it was winter. German fort. So one of the reasons why we were all Americans today is because George Washington and his crew crossed the Delaware. By taking that fort, he caused a reversal in the time that people now wanted to join him because he was being successful. Up until that point, he was the losing team, and people would actually join, get the gun, and leave because they got a weapon for free. So George Washington had a lot of trouble with deserters, and he had a lot of trouble with people leaving his ranks because of that. He had trouble paying them. They had no money. They had trouble feeding them. He had a lot of problems. And then he did this thing where he crossed the Delaware on boat and took that fort. And by doing that, although he kept it for 1 day, and then he left it because he couldn't hold it. He didn't have the troops to hold the fort. But people were then flocking to join his army because he was now successful, and they liked his philosophy. That's one of the reasons why we're Americans today, is because George Washington crossed the Delaware.
Sounds like a bloodbath.
Well, it was a pivotal point in American
But
history.
the assault sounded like a bloodbath.
Well, you didn't really get skewered. You moved away. If somebody came at you with a bayonet and said, go stand over there with the rest of them, you'd go stand over there with the rest of them. You wouldn't, So people weren't being killed by bayonets so much as that, as they were being herded, corralled, and then locked in a prison or locked in a room so that they wouldn't get out. So it was more of a case of taking the fort. Sure, people got killed, but not as many as you might think.
Separate them from their arms, they're defenseless.
Right, and they were drunk. It was New Year's Day, and so they were drunk. The Germans did not expect in sleet to be attacked by Americans. They didn't think the Americans had the power to
liquored up in your underwear, you're not going to fight too much.
Exactly. So you're caught out. And so that's really one of the reasons why George Washington was successful when he crossed the Delaware. The circumstances led up to his success.
Can she get a picture with you guys?
Absolutely, that's why we're here. Anybody wants a picture, that's what we do. Intended purposes. One of you ladies want to hold the board? Well, we'll get you guys. I recognize you, I think. You were here Friday. We'll get you guys here in a second. Gonna come on under here on? Okay.
Do you think you're exploring that bigger rope, bigger contraption?
No, not necessarily bigger contraption. You just end up with a bigger or a thicker end product. Go ahead and pull against the other, sir. The rope that you see laying there on the ground is actually a 6-line, 3-strand. So you still end up with the 3 strands. And just hold that one right there. And but because it's a thicker twine to start, you only have to put 2 twines to the hook. So you end up with 3 strands, but you end up with a thicker overall rope because your twine, your starting twine is thicker.
Okay.
So you take those 4 twines in this instance, and get spun together into 3 strands. Now you can, if you can, turn counterclockwise, and then this, all you need to do is kind of rock that board side to side just a little bit, and then it'll make the rope right behind you.
Cool.
Okay.
So would you be able to make the rope for like the shipyards with just
Correct. Yep. It would be a little bit more industrial looking, but the exact same concept. Just a little slower with the board. You can keep cranking it. The slower the board goes, and the tighter you keep everything, you get a nice tight twist, and which ends up making a nice, stronger rope. Yeah, the rope walks of the rope makers.
So by turning this crank, I'm blowing air into the fire. That's what gets it hot. And once the coal, I'm using coal and fuel. Once the coal gets hot enough, I'm able to put my metal in there, and it absorbs the heat. And once the metal's hot enough, I can bring it out to the end and do what I need to do. I pointed the ends of these. I got 4 from the make. It's actually for the vendors here who are making the sausage on a stick. What they're looking to do is they have sticks that go into the ground so they can set a grill on it so they can cook their sausage. Sitting there. I like to have them bright orange.
Alcohol, bagpipes, and gunfire. All right. I'm gonna sneak around over here if you don't mind.
I don't like this group.
So you don't like the sound?
And so, when Raccoon looked and he saw the 5 black rings of tarnish on his tail, he knew he was caught. He immediately confessed the whole thing to Raven. Now, Raven, fortunately for Raccoon, Raven has a good sense of humor. And at first, he laughed at the trick that Raccoon had played on him, but he said, "Raccoon, I want you to sit down on this rock, and I will pass judgment on you for stealing my ring." And he thought for a moment, and then finally he said, "Raccoon, in payment for stealing my rings, from now on, you will always wear the black mask that you painted on your face to disguise yourself. From this day forward, your paws will always be stained black from the ashes of the torch that you carried. And forevermore, your tail will show the rings of tarnish from the rings that you stole from me." And so it was that Raccoon had a new and very different coat. At first, some of the other animals laughed and teased Raccoon about his new coat, but after a while, he grew used to it and grew to love his new coat as much as the old. But did Raccoon learn his lesson? No! He still goes about poking his nose in everyone's business and stealing whatever he can.
And everything over there all started out the same way as So it takes a couple of minutes for me to get the wheel up stamped and this thing is going as fast as I can to get this wobbly bunch of clay right into the center.
I'm hearing things.
Yeah.
I had one up and told me
Is it?
Michael, what am I?
Here it is. It's building somewhere over there. Look at this.
I used to.
It's fun.